All right. We're a little early, so got a couple of minutes. Got a couple of minutes. Let me get some music going, maybe. All right. I feel like is that gonna stand? I hope so. All right. All right. It's 7 o'clock, and I know you're coming. This is your fearless founder, Cheryl Banks, coming to you live from the lab in Mo City, Texas. Let me silence that. All right. So, y'all, you get another second, another minute. Hey, Mama Alice Richardson, how are you? Good morning or evening. I'm used to saying good morning. Good evening. It's Wow Wednesday. WOW Women of Wisdom. Words of wonder. Words of wonder. We're talking tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and get started about women and how to be a woman of influence. And today, I wanted to talk about, let me quiet the music. I wanted to talk about Eleanor Roosevelt. I challenged my group to get a new book because leaders are readers. And this is the book that I got. It's a book I already had probably years and years. And I had started it, but I never really went very far. So I picked it up because I love hearing success stories. And today we're going to talk about Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt. Okay, so I was so shocked. This says how to be like women of influence, life lessons from 20 of the greatest. And it's by Pat and Ruth Williams with Michael Mink. Okay, with Michael Mink. So Eleanor Roosevelt was so interesting. She was born in 1884 and she died in 1962. And it says compassion. She was the epitome of compassion. I was not a gifted person, but I was always deeply interested in every manifestation of life, good or bad. I never let slip an opportunity to increase my knowledge of people and condition. She was a life learner. Hey, Sharon Johnson and Stephanie Malden. Sharon, you got on. Did Stephanie help you? Did Destiny help you? I'm so glad to see you. We're talking about Eleanor Roosevelt because we're talking about women of influence. She said, I was not a gifted person, but I was always deeply interested in every manifestation of life, good or bad. I never let slip an opportunity to increase my knowledge of people and condition. Okay, I thought it was very interesting. Well, I'll get to that part. Eleanor Roosevelt changed the traditional role of a first lady. Before her, First ladies were like trophy wives. They were just pretty and made the president look good. Rather than limiting herself to strictly ceremonial duties, she immersed herself in the great issues of the day. Although she was born into privilege, she spent her life trying to improve the quality of people's lives around the world. Her social conscience was developed and nurtured during childhood. Her childhood was filled with sadness. When she was 8, her mother, Anna, only 29 years old, died of diphtheria. Um, and that was on December 7th, 1892. 49 years later would again test her as it would the rest of the nation. She wasn't really close to her mother and sadly was made to feel like she was a disappointment to her. She said her mother was troubled by her lack of beauty. Her mother didn't think she was pretty, I guess. It's so sad, you know? If nobody thinks it, your mom's supposed to at least say it, right? Um, and I knew it as a child. A child senses these things. She tried hard to bring me up well so that my manners would compensate for my looks. But her efforts only made me more keenly conscious of my shortcomings. Photographs of Roosevelt as a child and teenager don't support her feelings, but her perception of herself was her reality and it blocked out everything else. She says, I was deeply ashamed. I felt as only a young girl can feel it, all the pain of being the ugly duckling. Oh my gosh, that's so sad. But listen to that, y'all. Think about that. She says her perception of herself was her reality. What is your perception of yourself? It is your reality. Whether it's real or not, it is your reality. But there was a shining light in her life. Her dad, Elliot, was, and this was so weird to me that her name was Roosevelt and she married Roosevelt. So, did y'all know? Where's my phone? Oh, I'm on my phone. She was like a distant cousin to her husband, like a second cousin twice removed or something. Because I was like, why am I reading? Why are they calling her Eleanor Roosevelt, but she hasn't married FDR yet? I was like confused, cornfused. How y'all doing out there? Okay, so her dad um, was the youngest brother of future President Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt. Elliot, her dad, was a chronic alcoholic. He was an alcoholic who embodied the tragedy of addiction. He did love Eleanor with all his heart. However, and in his arms, she felt safe. She felt loved. She felt beautiful. She was a daddy's girl. She said, with my father, I was perfectly happy. Elliot, her father, was banished from the house by his brother, Theodore Roosevelt, while he underwent treatment. And as a child, remember, as a child, she was made to feel ugly by her mom. And she thought once her dad was banished, I had hoped that someday I would make a home for him again and we would travel together and do many things which he painted as interesting and pleasant to be looked forward to in the future. I mean, for a little girl to go through all of this, she's wanting to make a place for her dad. It's crazy. Anna, her mom, and Elliot, her dad, had very different views of the world. Anna was a proud part of New York socialites, the society that Eleanor contemptuously wrote thought itself all important, hoity toity. Okay. Elliot Roosevelt and his family, while well to do, weren't as concerned about New York society as they were about the society where everyday people lived. Very early, Eleanor became conscious of the fact that there were people around her who suffered in one way or another. She was 5 or 6 when her father took her to feed the homeless for a Thanksgiving dinner, And from then on, her course of helping the disadvantaged was set. She was made for it. I mean, she found her purpose, her calling. Uh, as a member of society, she was a debutante. That's how they came out, and they were expected to dabble in charity work as a part of their coming out. She, however, didn't just do it as an obligatory thing. She embraced it. She didn't do it for show as most of the girls did. She chose to teach in the slums of New York, an activity picked by very few women. They didn't want to be there. They want the rhythm without the blues. She also sought to improve the working conditions of people who labored in garment factories and department stores by joining an advocacy group called the Consumers League. Later during World War I, Roosevelt, who was a mother of five, I think one had died, um, she worked 2 to 3 shifts a week in a Red Cross canteen. And from 1927 until her husband Franklin's election to the president in 1932, she taught school in Manhattan. She despised people who were callously. She judged. I laughed at this because it says she despised people who were callously judgmental and thought themselves better than the less fortunate. So she was judging the people who judged. It was her marriage to Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1905 that set the course for her public life. Um, when Franklin was later elected to New York State Senate in 1911, the Roosevelt family moved into the state capital of Albany, and Eleanor naturally took an interest in politics and began to discover, she said, that interests lead to interest, knowledge leads to more knowledge, and the capacity for understanding grows with the effort to understand. I love that. Interest leads to interest. She went on to be appointed as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy by President Woodrow Wilson. Um, in 1913 and 1920, he was a Democratic candidate for vice president on a ticket that was crushed by Republican Warren Harding. Despite the loss, the 39-year-old Franklin was to have an exceptionally bright future. When this is so good, contracted polio, y'all remember he had polio in 1922, it looked as though his political career was over. His legs were paralyzed. Isn't it crazy how lifes and it throws you for a loop? And just when everything is going smoothly, me and my daughter were talking about this today. There's always something. Here comes polio. Okay. He's paralyzed. He'd never be able to walk again. Franklin's domineering mother, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, viewed her son as an invalid for the rest of his life. She wanted him to retire quietly to the family estate in Hyde Park. She wanted him to just go away, live out his years in seclusion. Her anxiety over his general health was so great that she dreaded his making any effort whatsoever. She didn't want him moving, rest, you know. Make Eleanor, however, was different. His wife was different. We've just been talking about her. She's always been different. People who've always been different. Uh, she was too strong to feel sorry for herself, and she certainly wasn't going to let her husband give up. We never treated my husband as an invalid, Roosevelt wrote, and fortunately, he did not want to be treated that way. Isn't it funny how some people will put their things on you? They will put their limitations on you. Oh, look, I see what you're going through. You're weak. You need to rest. You can't get no, you go live out your days in Hyde Park in seclusion. You can't do anything because your legs don't work. And he was so blessed to have this woman. So he was a fighter. He diligently exercised the muscles that he could, and even learned to give the appearance that he could walk. So he was faking walking, y'all, as the president. This was essential for the continuation of his political career. Voters in the 1920s and 30s weren't going to elect a candidate who appeared to be physically helpless. Okay. So with his paralyzed legs, they strapped them to heavy braces. Franklin grasped the arm of an aide with one hand and his cane with the other. He first balanced himself and then he swiveled his hip and placed a braced leg forward, then braced himself and did the same thing with his other hip. This had the effect of making him appear to be walking a few steps. To accomplish this caused him tremendous pain. No pain, no gain. People try to limit my students all the time. Isn't that annoying, Amelia? Tell them what they can't do. Oh my gosh. Okay, no pain, no gain. Substitute. Okay, Eleanor kept Franklin in the public eye. She was Wonder Woman, substituting for him and giving speeches to different groups. The work by both Roosevelts paid off. Franklin was elected governor of New York in 28. 4 years later, when he was elected president of the United States. He set an example for the country by walking roughly 40 paces to the inaugural platform to take his oath of office, March 4th, 1933. Some people really live. Some people stare obstacles in the face and say, "Not today, Satan. You will not steal my life. You will not steal my life." After her husband's election to the presidency, Eleanor blazed a new path as First Lady, one of social activism rather than strictly ceremonial duties. As First Lady, she learned about the plight of the poor, and she was hooked. Not reading about it or hearing about it, but by actually going out and meeting the poor. Imagine that, right? She was literally in the battlefield. Okay, she wanted to be around the people who were struggling. She wanted to understand their problems firsthand. And there was plenty to absorb. 13 million citizens were unemployed. Industrial production had dropped to around 56% of what it had been just 4 years later. The Great Depression gave rise to shanty towns, the Hoovervilles, and the Dust Bowl. It was a time of hobos riding the railways and the enduring plea of, "Brother, can you spare a dime?" That's where it started. "Brother, can you spare a dime?" Today, we may see the Depression only in grainy black and white films, but then real people were suffering. Families with children were living in terrible rural poverty or urban decay. It was the sight of a child dying of hunger that made the tragedy of hunger become of such overriding importance to her. She saw a child dying, and yeah, her motto was, "Go out and see for yourself, and then make others see what you've seen." Go see for yourself and make others see what you've seen. I love that motto. It's like testifying, right? It's a testimony. You don't know the pain I've seen or been through, but let me tell you about it. You know, let me tell you about it. She took it upon herself to travel extensively around the country and report back to her husband. She was his eyes and ears and feet because he couldn't do all that walking. These trips, she says, gave me a wonderful opportunity to visit all kinds of places and to see and to get to know a good cross section of people. Roosevelt said, in Grand Mirror, A Personal History of Eleanor Roosevelt, her grandson David Roosevelt wrote, "One of the most remarkable qualities I remember was her ability to listen, to draw others out, and extend an invitation for them to talk about the things that really mattered to them." It's all about others. It's all about putting yourself in their shoes. Some people talk, 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 and they don't really want to know about what other people are going through. The lesson of the Depression, I'm skipping because I can't go through all of this. Eleanor believed was that people throughout the world were interdependent on each other. One part of the country, a group of countrymen cannot prosper while the others go downhill, she said. And that one country cannot go on gaily when the rest of the world is struggling. If we can get back to the feeling that we are responsible for each other, the years of depression would have been worthwhile. Amen, amen, and amen, right? If I remained in the White House all the time, she said, I would lose touch with the rest of the world. So she had to get outside of her comfort zone. That is where change happens. She didn't confine her concerns for people only, her concern for people to Americans either. She was all over the place. Puerto Rico, San Juan, let's see. There was a wealthy American colony in San Juan, but she wanted to get to the truth and see the real Puerto Rico. So she visited the poorest section of the city and discovered what she really wanted to know. She had to dig up. She said on a sightseeing trip, the one where they exploited laborers lived in muddy alleys and swamps to hundreds of foul smelling hovels with no plumbing. I'm guessing these are little shacks and no electricity, where women sat in the midst of filth, embroidering clothes for minimal wages. They were probably in the filth making the clothes for, people who are well off to wear. After helping to publicize the investigation's findings, Roosevelt urged American women to boycott Puerto Rico's embroidered goods. So she set that up. And Kearns Goodwin writes, in addition to her investigations, led to an effort to clean up the slums of Puerto Rico. Can you imagine what God can use you to do if you're willing to step outside of your comfort zone, get out there and be salt and light? Let's see. It talked about that the island's first housing project was named after her. Yes. Housing the poor in decent living conditions remains one of her legacies. What will your legacy be? Housing the poor in decent living conditions remain one of her legacies. What will your legacy be? She fulfilled her lifetime purpose to improve the lot of humankind. I love that. A poll showed that Roosevelt's popularity was equal to that of her husband's, who was the president, right? After his first year in office, she says, I am the agitator. My husband's the politician. She likes to shake things up, right? On December 7th, 1941, America changed forever when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. In their hour of need, Americans looked to the Roosevelts for strength. Franklin's gift as a leader, Eleanor said, this is what she said about her husband, whether in war or peace, was his inherent optimism. I have never known a man who gave one a greater sense of security. It's so important for a leader to be able to give people a sense of security. She said, I never heard Franklin say there was a problem that he thought it was impossible for human beings to solve. He recognized the difficulties and often said that while he did not know the answer, he was completely confident that there was an answer and that one had to try until either one found it himself or found someone else who could, right? With World War II raging, Roosevelt answered her husband's call to go to London in 1942, October. It was a dangerous time there because the Germans were still conducting deadly air raids over the city. Her mission was to observe the work that women were doing in place of men in previously well dominated venues such as factories. She wanted to learn how such programs could best be implemented in the United States. With so many men in uniform, women in both countries had to take over the jobs that were usually held by men to maintain production for the Allied war effort. Oh, her trip She wasn't on a sightseeing tour going to have tea with the king and queen. The trip to Great Britain seemed to offer her a chance to do something that might be useful. She's like, I'm here. I might as well do something useful. In addition, she delivered a message of hope from President Roosevelt to the American servicemen stationed there who were preparing for the invasion of North America. She found something to do. She was sitting there and found a way to make a difference or make a difference for someone. On her own initiative, she went to the South Pacific and the the South Pacific Theater of War in 1942 and 1943. She traveled to Bora Bora, Samoa, Guadalcanal, visited the troops at U.S. military bases and wounded in their hospital. Admiral, this is funny, Admiral William E. Halsey wasn't happy about having to divert his attention from fighting the Japanese to what he perceived as entertaining Eleanor Roosevelt. He said he dreaded her arrival. When she expressed her desire to visit Guadalcanal, Halsey said, Guadalcanal is no place for you, ma'am. Roosevelt responded, I'm perfectly willing to take my chances. Get out of my way, son, which she did. Watching her go about her business, he watched her. He realized that she wasn't a dignitary looking for a photo op, but rather a caring American who just happened to be the president's wife. He wrote that among other things, in 12 hours, she inspected two Navy hospitals, an Army hospital. When I say she inspected those hospitals, I don't mean she shook hands with the chief medical officer, glanced into a sun parlor, and left. I meant she went to every ward, stopped at every bed, and spoke to every patient, asking them their name, how did they feel, did they need anything, and could she take a message home for them. She went above and beyond. He said, I marveled at her. Now he's marveling at the woman he dreaded meeting, right? Both physical and mental, she walked for miles and she saw patients who were grievously and gruesomely wounded. But I marveled most at their expressions as she leaned over them. It's a sight I will never forget. When she moved into the White House, and I'm skipping, she rejected Secret Service protection and chauffeurs. She rejected all that extra stuff. When she traveled to the South Pacific, she got up in the morning with the soldiers. She ate breakfast with them all the time. And at that time, she was 59 years old. Through her daily column, which she wrote 26 years, beginning in 1936, she helped to shape the national debate in America by getting out in front of such issues as civil rights, women's rights, and world peace. She had a thing for peace. She fought for civil rights for Black Americans, not only in print and principle, but in the Oval Office. Her constant prodding led her husband to issue executive orders that barred discrimination in New Deal projects. In 1939, an organization that she belonged to, the Daughters of the American Revolution, refused to allow contralto Marian Anderson to sing in Constitution Hall, which they owned because she was Black. Roosevelt, who'd invited Anderson to sing at the White House in 1936, was outraged and took action that caught the attention of the nation. In February 1939, in her My Day column, she wrote, the question is, if you belong to an organization and disapprove of an action which is typical of a policy, should you resign, or is it better to work for a change point of view within the organization? To remain as a member implies approval of that action, and therefore I am resigning. Yeah, she put her, what do you call it, money where her mouth was. In the long run, there is no more liberating, no more exhilarating experience than to determine one's own position, state it bravely, and then act boldly, stand on it. In addition to resigning, This is what she did. I just love her. In addition to resigning, she arranged for Anderson, the black singer, a public concert in front of the very symbol of racial equality in Washington, D.C., the Lincoln Memorial. 75,000 people turned out to hear the great Anderson sing. Oh my gosh. Things were either right or wrong with me, she said. Oh my gosh. And it goes on. Joseph Lash wrote that Franklin's political career was dependent on Eleanor's resolution. Her encouragement, readiness to serve, as his proxy, his representative in politics. That was everything. He always needed her more than he was ever able to recognize or that he could usually bring himself to say. When he was president, when Franklin, who was still president, died April 12th, 1945, Eleanor cabled her four sons, all of whom were serving their country in the military, to stay strong. Father slept away. I like that. Father slept away. When he passed away, father slept away. He would expect you to carry on and finish your jobs. Now, a lot of people would judge her for that. A lot of people would be like, they would be clutching their pearls. Oh my gosh, your dad died and your mom told you to carry on and finish your job? Franklin was relatively young, 63 when he died. What gave Eleanor comfort was that he lived a full and productive life with paralyzed legs, which to her was the measure of success. She said, if at the end one can say this man used to the limit the powers that God granted him, he was worthy of love and respect and all of the sacrifices that many made in order that he may achieve what he deemed to be his task, and that life with and then that life has been lived well and there are no regrets. Their life as husband and wife wasn't always easy. It wasn't, especially after Franklin's well chronicled infidelity with Eleanor's secretary. Of course, why not? Her secretary, Lucy Mercer, in 1918. Still, she later remarked, my husband and I had come through the years with an acceptance of each other's faults, a deep understanding, warm affection, and agreement on social values. It was more than about them. It was more than about them. It was saving lives, changing lives. Oh, I love it. Roosevelt's experiences with the death of her father and her brother, both from chronic alcoholism, surely shaped her outlook on not wasting the precious gift of life. Sorrow in itself and the loss of someone whom you love is hard to bear, she wrote. But when the sorrow is mixed with regret and consciousness of waste, there is an added touch of bitterness, which is even more difficult to carry day in and day out. The later years, at the time of Franklin's death, she was 61 and she was far from finished. I didn't want to cease trying to be useful in some way, she wrote. I did not want to feel old, and I seldom have. For the last 17 years of her life, Roosevelt dedicated herself to preventing future wars. By 1946, she'd become the chairman of the UN Commission for Human Rights. The declaration, let's see, after 2 years of hard work, her commission presented the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was approved by the UN General Assembly on December 10th. That's Robert's birthday. The declaration defined the rights of all humankind. I wanted with all my heart a peaceful world, she later wrote in 1962, and I knew it could never be achieved on a lasting basis without greater understanding between people. She was for peace. I've never bored, never found the days long enough for the range of activities which I wanted to fill them, she said. She was never bored. She viewed her travel time as an opportunity to catch up on reading. It's always a different way to look at something. Only through a book, Roosevelt said that it's possible to explore the most fascinating thing in the world, another person's mind. She never stopped trying to learn, always learning from others about people, events, and life itself. I had really, she said, I only had really three assets. I was keenly interested, accepted every challenge and every opportunity to learn more, and I had a great energy and self discipline. On August 8th, when the United States of America dropped the world's first atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, she wrote in her My Day column of the new dangerous world that man had entered the nuclear age. We only have two alternative choices: destruction and death, or construction and life. Oh my gosh, when she started to travel to Hiroshima some years later, the bomb had been dropped. She expressed compassion and empathy for the victims. To arrive in Hiroshima is an emotional experience, she wrote. Here is what the first atom bomb ever to be dropped on human beings was actually used. The people of the United States believe that our leaders thought long and carefully before we used this dreaded weapon. We know that they thought first the welfare of our own people, and that they believed the bomb might end the war quickly with less loss of life everywhere than if it had not been dropped. Did y'all know that's why they dropped it? I didn't know that. Okay. God grant me, God grant men greater wisdom in the future. I just love this so much. Life has got to be lived. Live life boldly. She says her sage advice to young and everyone alike was to live life boldly. Boldly. Perhaps the older generation is often to blame with its cautious warning: take a job that'll give you security, not adventure. But I say to the young, do not stop thinking of a lot of life as an adventure. You have no security unless you can live bravely, excitingly, imaginatively, unless you can choose a challenge instead of a competence. She kept working until her death in 1962 at the age of 78. She says, one of her detractors said, I love this, while I weigh as honestly as I can their grounds for disapproval, she weighs them when they disapprove her. When I feel that I am right in what I did, because there's always somebody criticizing, it seems to me that I cannot afford, as a self-respecting individual, to refuse to do a thing merely because it will make me disliked or bring down a storm of criticism on my head. I often feel that too many Americans today tend to reject a thing, however right they believe it to be, that they want to, because they fear they will be unpopular or find themselves standing alone instead of in the comfortable anonymity of the herd. She was an awesome lady, a friend and supporter of Roosevelt. Congressman Helen Gahagan Douglas said that Roosevelt got even with her enemies in a way that almost was cruel. She forgave them. She forgave them. Um, a Gallup poll, many international polls showed that Roosevelt was the most admired woman in the world. While she never considered herself to be gifted in any way, she said of her life, what basic object I had for many years was to grasp every opportunity to live and experience life as deeply, as fully, as widely as I possibly could. It seemed to me stupid to have the gift of life and not use it to the utmost of one's ability. Wasn't that good? And there are questions, but I know I've run over. I just wanted to talk about her. I told y'all didn't hear me say it. Maybe if you weren't on, I was wondering why her name was Eleanor Roosevelt and she married uh, Franklin Roosevelt. I was like, that's weird that they had the same name. Well, they're like second cousins, twice removed. They're cousins. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the talk. It was a lot. She was an amazing woman. Next, I have a lot of people in here, and I think Mother Teresa's next, but they're different people. So maybe I'll be talking about that next time. I love y'all. Go forth and multiply. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Very good. Thank you. Bye. Hey, Patty Payne Hager. Hey, Joyce Hardy. Amelia Amos and Mama and Stephanie. Now Wilson and Sharon Johnson. I hope you're feeling better. Sharon, we're still praying for you. Y'all, have a great evening. Bye.